Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, I have an incredibly special guest on the show. Today, we've got Mike Brown from the Resonant Arc channel, the State of the Arc podcast. Mike, I want to go ahead and just throw it to you. Before I do that, though, if you listen to the previous podcast that I did with Casen, he did a little bit of sharing about what the channel is. So I kind of want to have a little challenge for you. Okay. Mike, if you could describe what Resonant Arc is, the State of the Arc podcast. If you could describe this to my audience from the perspective of what you hope sounds like from someone who watches your show. Let's say I'm a viewer of your channel. How am I sharing this podcast to somebody else?
Okay. We've actually done this exercise internally before, so fortunately it's a pretty easy thing for me to answer.
Cool.
Essentially, the core of our show is about helping our audience appreciate games that they grew up with even more. So we're seeking to, speak to somebody who loves, let's say, Xenogears or something like that. Grew up with it, has this passion for the game, but maybe can't articulate themselves even exactly why it's so special to them. And so we plan to come in and provide research and introspection and deep dive analysis that will help them understand the game even more deeply, more profoundly, and help them understand a little bit more about themselves and why this thing was special to them and why it was developmental or why it was a, sort of a formational experience for them. And so that is kind of at the core of what we do and why we do it. And we hope that people will share the podcast as a matter of sharing with others a part of themselves. This is important to me because of A, B, and C. This is important to me because these games say something about what I believe or who I am. And I would like to share that piece of who I am with other people so they can understand me better. That's more or less what we're aiming to do with our show.
Well, from personally experiencing your show and listening to it on a regular basis, and not only just that, but I'm a Patreon member. I'm in the inner sanctum, so
That's true.
It fills my day, with a lot of joy and appreciation, just being able to hear you guys talk about some of my favorite video games or even movies as well. Just in that sense, I mean, it's been wonderful for me to just kind of sit in and hear the process. It's kind of one of those things where I'm like, man, what do I really have to ask? Because I feel like as a listener who's also in the behind the scenes realm as well, a piece of me kind of feels like I know you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's kind of surreal to be able to actually just get to talk to someone who I am just listening to a lot. But this is super cool. I'm excited about this. I actually, funny story. I started my channel partly because of what you guys have done with the channel. I've been big into Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, just kind of the Square Enix JRPG sphere forever. And I had an idea that I thought, I don't know if you ever get this way. Do you ever have an idea for a video before you even get into the planning stages of it? You just have a feeling like this video is going to do really well.
Yeah, I think once or twice I've been able to, from sort of conception to the execution, I knew the entire time, like this is kind of a tangent. On our channel, there's been this sort of back and forth, a little bit of a swing between what we know will work versus what we actually want to produce or content that we feel is more fulfilling, but that maybe won't sort of strike the mainstream gaming audience. And so there's been once or twice where I've read comments like, this channel is dead now. The view counts are low or whatever, right? And I would turn around to that person and I would say, next video that goes up, I guarantee is going to hit 200,000 views. And then I would go make some sort of list video, like best 50 games of all time or something. It immediately gets there. So it's like,
the top 10s, the rankings.
Yeah, I know exactly what works on YouTube versus what I want to be doing, which is not turning the channel into that type of content all the time. But anyways, yeah, sorry for the tangent, but I know exactly
No, you're
what you're
good.
saying.
Yeah. Well, so the idea that I had at that time was I'm going to make a video that is like a primer to the Final Fantasy series. I had done a ranking of the Kingdom Hearts games. I did a couple of reviews of some video games as well. And I just figured, Final Fantasy 16 was a brand new, like it was about to come out. They had just released a demo for the game and everything. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to make this video. Where should you start in the Final Fantasy series? Let's say you're a newcomer. Maybe you've checked it out prior. If you're going to jump in, here's a list of recommendations where I think would be a good starting point based on how you like to play video games. Are you a story-driven gamer? Are you a gameplay-first kind of gamer? That was the idea. And I made the video. And it is currently my most viewed video. It's sitting at, I don't know, somewhere in between 300 and 350,000 views or something like that. And I even actually one point got recognized because of that video in person. It was the first time that had ever happened. It was crazy. But before I made that video, I reached out to maybe 6 or 7 other YouTubers, and not to put you on blast, but I emailed you. I sent you an email and I said, please be in this video. And I got no response.
Emails are tough.
Yeah.
Because I have so many of them. I've got like my work email, I've got my personal email, I've got 2 or 3 other ones. And so I don't get around to them all the time, especially I'm getting better at it now for like the Resonant Arc business email, which we have officially set up at this point, where like I have an address, a personal one, mike@resonantarc.com and Casen at Resonant. So we're a little bit better at it now, but there was a time for sure where I barely checked that thing at all. So
if it makes you feel better, not a single person, no one responded to me.
I wasn't ignoring you. I probably didn't see it till like 6 months after the fact.
I figured, especially now that I am more ingrained in Discord, especially with a lot of these content creators. Now I've basically spoken to every one of them, and we've had good conversations here and there. It's the same sort of story, though. Dude, I just don't even check my email.
Yeah, so it's just too much.
I totally get it.
Too many emails, too many people reaching out through this or that avenue, whether it's social media, whether it's on Patreon, whether it's on Discord. There's so many of them to check, and there's so many messages all the time that at some point you just can't get to them all. So
yeah, no hard feelings, but you missed out. You could have gotten an extra 300,000 eyes on your channel, brother. So I wanted to also talk too, because I know that prior to even starting this channel, which by the way, I've been listening to since it's been Dark Pixel. So I love what you guys have done, but I've also heard throughout the course of just making these podcasts on YouTube, both you and Casen started, obviously not necessarily doing video game stuff, but in a lot of film production, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. What kind of is your experience prior to starting your YouTube journey?
That's a very interesting question, because the YouTube journey it goes back even further than the Dark Pixel channel that Casen and I worked on. So the very first video I ever edited was Final Fantasy I review retrospective, but I uploaded it on a really old personal channel called Eisen Wilshire III. I don't know why that name just sounded.
Everyone go subscribe. Everyone go subscribe right now.
You can still find it probably. I think the series that is still uploaded to that channel is a Harvest Moon Let's Play, like Harvest Moon 64.
Right.
So those videos are still there, and they did pretty well, all things considered. But anyway, so that was the very first video I ever edited using like Adobe Premiere, modern kind of editing software. Before that, when I was growing up, Casen and his brothers and me and my brothers were neighbors down the street and kind of childhood friends. And we liked making movies. We were really, really into especially action films, like spy films, whether it's James Bond or Mission Impossible, things like that. Star Wars, of course. So we would get together with our parents' camcorders and we would just make movies. That's just kind of what we did. We didn't have editing software back then, or even computers that could really handle that kind of software. So we edited them on VCRs. So, or just in camera, right? We would just kind of rewind and like stop and then start recording again for the next shot. And if we messed it up, we'd have to rewind the tape and like start it again. So we made a bunch of movies. I think 2 James Bond movies. We made 2 Mission Impossible movies. We made a Star Wars movie. And that was just what we liked to do. And I had an ambition from a young age to be a filmmaker. I think the first time I remember having that thought that I wanted to make movies was somewhere around 10 years old. So I started, experimenting with my parents' camera and making videos and stuff like that around that age. And so I had already developed a lot of those skills, through junior high and high school, and then decided that I was going to pursue digital media in college. So I began studying, but I was only in college for 1 year before I realized that I was teaching my professors things about the software that were more efficient. Well, if you do it this way, it's better than the way you're showing it. And I was like, this is such a waste of time and money. I should be out, making a film production company or something like that and just building a portfolio instead of wasting my time at school. So I dropped out, started that film production company with Casen and his older brother, Landon, who used to work with us on the gaming channel, actually, for a little bit. We did that for several years. So the bulk of our business was making, advertisements, marketing material for different startup businesses in the area, for trade shows or for their websites or marketing and ads and things like that. But we would use our YouTube channel as a way to get visibility for that. So we had a YouTube channel where we did action shorts, and a very heavy focus on visual effects. So,
dude, I can't tell you how many times me and some of my friends still reference that like one crazy trick. What is it?
Yeah, one weird trick.
Yeah, one weird trick. Yeah, so
there
good.
Was a very memeable sort of gimmick marketing trend at the time online.
Yeah, doctors hate him.
Yeah, this one weird trick. You can fix your issue with balding or whatever it is that they're trying. But they would phrase it with, this group of people hates this person who has sort of figured out the secret to like solving this obviously unsolvable problem. Yeah, and it was obviously a scam or whatever. So we decided to make a video about a guy who's an action hero who he basically is that guy who knows the one weird trick to everything. Yeah. He can solve any problem. Everybody hates him. Anyway, that was the idea for the video.
Orthodontists hate him. So good.
Yeah. So that was kind of what we did for many years there. And then YouTube has just changed a lot. And we were spending a lot of time, weeks, sometimes months and months, developing one short video. And YouTube really changed to where they prioritized longer form content that was uploaded frequently. So at least once a week, if not more. And that channel basically died when that change in priority happened. There are other channels that have survived, who kind of survived through that, but they already had massive audiences, million plus subscribed channels like Corridor Digital. But we were kind of like that. We were kind of like a Corridor Digital type channel, but we weren't nearly as big as they were. So that's when we pivoted to the gaming stuff, which I had already been doing on my own, like I said, all the way back since the Eisen Wilshire III days. So I just sort of migrated all that content I had been making into this channel that we currently have now, which is now called Resonant Arc. And we've been doing that since then. So it's probably around 2016 that we made that pivot. So about 9 years ago. You
had the privilege during the time that it was still around to work at a GameCrazy Hollywood video combo store.
Yes, I did.
Honestly, I can't tell you how many wonderful memories I have just going into a store like that, renting video games. Like, who rents video games nowadays? Like,
nope,
it's crazy.
Not a thing.
That's how I got into like I remember my mom accidentally bought me a copy of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. She didn't know what it was and had no idea what the letters on the front of the box meant. And then my dad found it one day and just threw it in the trash.
Wow.
But dude, yeah, great memories with GameCrazy. How was working there? And also, I guess maybe compared to something like a GameStop at the time as well.
I worked there in like 2004 and 2005. So this would have been
The golden age.
right after I graduated high school. It was kind of the job that I took because I had been working at a restaurant as a waiter for a while before then. I really hated that place. So I got this job and I loved it personally. Being such a fan of filmmaking, being able to just take movies home and sort of watch them and study them and get inspiration from them, but also the side attachment to that being the game side of things, and I've always been a huge gamer. In fact, my passion for films is really interesting because I had all this passion to be a filmmaker, but I think as a consumer, I always had a greater passion for games than even films. There was something about the participatory aspect of it that I always found more compelling as a storytelling medium. But I never had much of an ambition to be a game maker.
Sure.
So kind of weird. But anyway, being able to, like you said, I rented games all the time, but then I got discounts, so I'd turn around and buy them if I really liked them. We had all kinds of awesome events there. We would always do like tournaments for Smash Brothers and other things. And so I'm not a very social person. I never have been, but that was the one time in my life where I really kind of did get into a local community of people who would constantly be running gaming events and doing fun stuff. So it's kind of like the one point in my life where I was actively involved in things like that. So it was very fun. And the atmosphere there was great. Coworkers were awesome. My managers and bosses were great. I ended up leaving for a couple of years. I was in Las Vegas, and by the time I came back, all of the Hollywood videos were shut down, and there was no such thing anymore. It was just gone.
Yeah.
And so I want to say 2010 and 2011, I had a part-time job at GameStop, and that experience was horrible. It was way more, there was so much more pressure. They were always trying to get you to upsell. There were always like arbitrary goals they were putting on you to sell this many of the subscriptions to their magazine. I don't know if they still have that or not. And
the Game Informers, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, they were always putting pressure on you to upsell the Game Informer subscriptions and also their rewards program. And if you weren't hitting those targets, there was this constant threat of like firing you. And they were always having the events for the release dates. You know, it was usually on Fridays back then, right? It was like Friday nights. They'd have like big new game releases.
Oh, for like a midnight release?
Yeah, like a midnight release was a big thing at the time. And so we were always there late into the night, Friday nights. And it was just a totally different work environment that was just not conducive, at least to the way that I think I operate efficiently. And I hated every second of it. So I didn't stay there long. But the difference between the two was immense, and GameCrazy was way better. Way better.
Yeah. Just hearing your I guess testimony, if you want to say, about wanting to go into film production, I don't know, it just kind of reminds me of something like Hideo Kojima. I know he definitely was huge on film, and obviously still today you can point to plenty of signs that maybe say that he still cares about film more than he does video games. But I don't know, man. I know you say that you have no real desire to actually make a game, but whenever you're sitting down and playing these, for the most part, pretty cinematic video game experiences, do you look at it from a filmmaking critical lens sometimes? Is it, I don't know, ever inspiring to you to maybe try doing something yourself?
Well, the video game industry has changed a lot. So to clarify, when I was sort of developing my ideas as a kid about what I wanted to do for work, as a career, At that time, game development required a lot. There weren't as many specializations as there are today. You can work in the game industry today as a writer or just as specifically an artist or designer. Not that you could also in that time, but there was a certain, at least on my end, a thought or an expectation that there was going to be a certain amount of like coding or programming or those sorts of things that I would have to learn to really have a chance to break into that industry. And so when I sat down to design games on RPG Maker or other things like that, and it came time to stop the designing part of it, stop making the sprites, stop, blocking the scenes or, making the maps or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And you have to actually get into some lines of code and tell it that I want it to work like this. I checked out. I had no desire to ever learn those programming languages. Of course, my mindset has changed since then. I'm a little bit more open now to if I needed to do that, I could probably learn how to do it. It would be interesting. But point being, also the tools have changed a lot. So,
I think they've thankfully kind of made it a little easier for people jumping into it for the very first time.
Yeah. There are tools out there now to where a lot of that process is automated and you don't have to do as much of it, and they have interfaces that make, designing a lot easier now. At least from what I understand. I've never actually tried to work in Game Maker or Unreal Engine 5 or Unity or anything like that, but from what I understand, it's a lot easier now than when I was younger. So, there have been thoughts every now and then that maybe it would be something to be worth looking into. I think it would take so much time just to get trained on how to use the tools, and games require a lot of collaboration. It's actually similar in a way to film. My ambitions now of actually going out and making like a major film don't exist. I have no desire to do that anymore. It has entirely shifted to really small, something that can be done, if not by one person, with cross-team or cross-division skills, right?
Okay.
If it can't be done by me doing not only the writing and the directing and the cinematography and the lighting and the editing and the music production. If I can't do every part of that myself and I'm going to have to work with a crew of people, I almost immediately say it's not worth it. And when it comes to game design, it requires that kind of collaborative work.
Yeah, the team effort.
I know there are some games that have been developed by one person, but it's extremely rare, and it's extremely rare for a reason. I have leaned more and more into having more of an ambition as an author to write novels than to make major motion pictures or to make video games. That being said, there have still been times where it's like, well, maybe if Casen and I were to collaborate, we've worked together before, maybe we could get something off the ground, something in a state that's at least mostly playable. And then we could reach out to various people, 3 to 5 tops, who could maybe do certain things better than we could to collaborate.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd ever want to work on a team of more than 10 people total.
Yeah.
Keep it small, keep it something that a tight-knit group can make together, keep the scale contained in such a way to where you could do it at that level. Anything beyond that, I think I have totally lost interest in as a creator. It gets messy. It gets really, really difficult to manage large groups of people. And I think the largest production I ever worked on as a director, our crew was something like 25 or 30 people. And even then it was just like, dude, there's so much of this that if I were doing it, I would have done a better job. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm a little bit of a perfectionist in that way. And so when it's like I hand this job over to this person, and then I'm focused over here, and then I go review the work that they did later, and it's like, oh man, like I wouldn't have done it that way. I kind of I want too much control over the process. And just in general, I feel like the larger the crew, the more difficult it is to manage and the more stressful it becomes. And so I don't know if that's even an answer to your original question.
No, I mean, it's good. I'm glad you told me that. I was just thinking also, as you're talking about that, I think a lot of your audience, and obviously you would know your audience better than me, but from what I see, a lot of the people who are making content on many of the similar video games that you guys talk about, a lot of the people who are content creators are watchers and viewers of you guys. I think you have a very large audience of people who have been inspired by you guys to make content of their own, make channels of their own, podcasts of their own, analyzing video games in a similar way. But not only that, but other independent developers who I have communicated with. I recently got the opportunity to speak to 2 different indie game developers who are, for the most part, making video games all by themselves. And the moment that I mention Resonant Arc, they're like, oh yeah, I love those guys. I would love to like be one of the, games that they talk about one day. So do you ever have maybe some of those people reach out to you guys or say something along the lines of, hey, if you guys ever want to start something, if you guys want to start a game, I've got experience in this area. I would love to make a game with you guys. Does that ever come up for you guys?
So we have had a lot of indie game developers reach out to us, saying, hey, I listened to your show and I really appreciate what you guys do. And, the things that you've talked about have inspired me in this or that way. And that's always, I don't know. I always feel like I don't even know what to say to that because I don't know anything about game development, really.
Sure. Yeah.
I have read and researched, obviously, interviews from a lot of game developers, and that's the total extent of my knowledge about how games are made. It has nothing to do with experience, personally. So it's a flattering thing to hear, but also I feel like a bit of a fraud when I hear things like that.
What do I do with this information? Like what do you want me to say?
Not so much that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel inadequate to have been an inspiration to somebody who actually is doing the work because I've never done the work myself. So there's a little bit of a feeling of like being a fraud a little bit in that sense. I'm just a normal dude who has access to all the same public information that anyone else has. I don't feel like I have any sort of special insight into the actual process of making games. So it's always interesting though to get responses like that, but I've never had anyone reach out and say specifically, hey, would you like to collaborate? I guess once or actually that's the only time I've had a game designer reach out to me and want me to, work with them was in capacity for composition, for writing music. And twice I agreed that I would do it and then realized very quickly that there was absolutely no way I could make the time of my schedule to provide them something good. And I'm not going to write, crap music and take a payment for that. So, but beyond that, no, I've never had anyone say, hey, I'm a game maker. I'd like to make a game with you guys. Could we talk about, that's never happened. I've never even considered what maybe like whether that would be something we could do. It's an interesting proposition. I guess it would depend on how much time I would have to dedicate to it because as of right now, my schedule is so packed and so full because of my full-time job, and I'm traveling a lot for work and things like that. That I don't think I could contribute much to it, and so. But I would love. That's probably the way that would be best for me to ever break into it if that were to happen. If there was an experienced game designer who said, "I'm gonna like show you the ropes. I'll sort of like walk you through how to use the tools. We'll collaborate together and I'll share what I know. And they were sort of like a mentor in the process. That
Sure.
I would be very open to. But I just don't have nearly enough experience or any expertise to be able to provide anything of value to an indie game maker in a collaboration. And so I would feel, again, really inadequate if that were proposed to me, but it sounds fun.
So you mentioned you got musical background. People have reached out to you to talk about possibly even making a song, whether it be, I imagine, for a game or for a channel that they're making or something like that. What's your experience with music? I know you used to definitely do covers. I think you and Casen both would put out covers on the channel. First of all, when's that coming back? Because I need that. But also, I'm just curious to hear what your background is with music. I think we have a lot of similar music taste.
I come from a musical family. My grandmother on my father's side is an amazing pianist. My mother is a very good pianist as well. She taught me piano from a really young age. I was probably 5 or 6 when she started teaching me. I ended up picking up the guitar around age 12 and took lessons for a while. I was in a band in high school. So, nothing like super serious or anything like that. I haven't done any sort of extensive music theory training or classes or study or anything like that. So there's a lot about music theory and sort of the nitty gritty behind music that I'm totally ignorant of. But I do have an ear for music. I mostly have learned to play by ear. And I do have a lot of experience with like digital music composition tools, whether it's Reason, Fruity Loops. There are a lot of different software like that. The Contact libraries, if you've never heard of that, CONKACT, I think, Contact, so with Ks.
Yeah.
They offer a ton of really, really great libraries where you can get some very realistic. I mean, they do actually record players, like playing instruments. And so I've done a lot of stuff with that.
Nice.
And so I composed a lot of music for our videos. I've done a lot of orchestrations and things like that. There are a few videos on our channel that are essentially remastered, or I guess what you maybe would consider a remaster or a reorchestration from classic video game pieces. Whether I think I did one on Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, and I did a Final Fantasy Prelude one. And then we've done a lot of rock covers in the past of certain video game music on our old channel and elsewhere. My experience, I guess, with music is that I've played around with it and tinkered with it and experimented and had fun. I've never done much in an official capacity other than for my full-time job. In a couple of different jobs I've had, I've then composed music for certain marketing material or whatever here or there. It's not like it's super extensive or really impressive. But I have done a lot of it in my free time, and it is like a hobby of mine, I guess. And I do really enjoy doing it when I get the chance to do that.
I relate on the playing by ear. I started playing guitar when I was 7, but I'm also a professional cellist. And my orchestra teacher growing up, he left me kind of not in first chair. He would kind of like always dangle that over my head because I wasn't good at reading music very well. And he would be like, hey, dude, playing by ear is not going to win UIL. You know what I mean? So that was kind of, I mean, I relate to you there. So the music theory aspect stuff, a lot of it kind of goes over my head. I still play like in other settings, like a worship team at my church or something like that. So like the number system, all of that's very familiar with me. But yeah, doing that, doing all the music theory is not for me.
Reading music is something I've always considered important. I've understood it's really important, but it's not how I relate to music. For me, the experience with music has always been more spiritual or something. There's something beyond like what's written on the page, or there's like a strong connection to it that I have to feel rather than like really think about. So I feel like if I'm thinking about music too much, what I make suffers versus just feeling it and expressing it in this sort of raw kind of way. And so, you know, maybe that's a cop-out for just being too lazy to learn how to read it better. But
well,
just my
even whenever
experience.
I'm playing like with a team, right, and we're playing a song, maybe I've never heard it before, I usually just say, what key are we in? That's it. All I need to know is that. And then the rest is like you say, maybe it is a spiritual thing. I'm just kind of feeling it out from there.
Yeah.
But yeah. But just kind of on the idea of writing as well, I know you had said that you are writing a book. As someone who's listened to your podcast for a long time, I feel like you've been writing this book for like 50 years, brother. When's it coming out, man?
Not 50, but I think something like 21. Yes.
Dang, man.
I started writing this book when I was, when was it? It's my freshman year of high school. It was in my English class. This teacher was the best teacher, Miss Wiley, ever.
Shout out, Miss Wiley.
Shout out to Miss Wiley. If I ever publish this book, she's getting the first printed copy off the press. Like, nice. It's going to be hers. She essentially set me off on a path to write this story and develop this story. So it started out as a project in the class. We were studying the monolith, the hero's journey, in the class that year. We read the Odyssey. We read the Hobbit. We read, I can't remember what else. It was a couple of other, big sort of like
all the kinds of books that you get like in a leather bound edition, like for your bookshelf.
Exactly. And the project that she gave to the class was a 5-page story that included all of the elements, all of the steps on the hero's journey. So we had to clearly label those in a color-coded way and be like, here's where this part happens, here's where this part happens. So it was a 5-page assignment, and we had a week to do it. And I turned in a 130-ish page novella. I just fell in love with the process. I knew that was exactly the kind of story that I was into, that I wanted to write myself, that I was inspired by in my personal life, that I talk about now all the time on my channel. It's basically just games that follow that exact structure. Yeah. So anyway, she told me to publish it. She was like, you need to publish this book. This is amazing. And I was like, it's not amazing. It was written by a 16-year-old in 1 week. It's not amazing. I'm going to keep developing it. I'm going to keep working on it. And I have been ever since then. I'm now 38 years old, so I guess it's more like 22 years. So dang, I finished a version of it in 2020 during the pandemic. And I was like, it's done. It's, something like 120,000 words, 350 or 60-ish pages. And I was like, it was done. It was finally done. And, I had at that point been writing it for years and years. And I think I trashed it and started it over something like 6 or 7 times. So wow. I would get really far into it. I'd be like, this is garbage. Start over. Like, just start from scratch. Start over again. Get to a certain point. Oh, gosh, like, I hate it. Trash it. Start it over again. Did that many times. I had writers groups where I had, friends that I trusted who were also aspiring authors. We would, share our stuff with each other, give feedback. I'd get through that process with them. We'd do that for 6 months. Nah, it sucks. Trash it again. So to have actually gotten all the way to the end and actually have finished it, a completed manuscript, was a huge accomplishment for me. And I was super, super happy because, like, I finally did it. I can go publish this thing now. So I went and hired an editor, and we went through it. They told me, hey, this story is on a level above what we typically get. I think that you've made something pretty good here. Good luck in the process of finding an agent and getting it published. So that whole process was ready. The manuscript was edited professionally. It was ready to be sent out to agents. And so I did that. I think I sent it out to about 20. And then I got no replies from any of those 20 people. Anybody who is a published author will tell you that's nothing. You got to send it out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of agents. You just got to keep sending it till you find one sucker who is dumb enough to think what you wrote is good, and they'll go to bat for you. But
what was it like? Brandon Sanderson, he just some rando at a convention was like, "Oh, what's this?" And it was Elantris, like his very first published book.
Yeah,
and that was how he got it started. It was just some random guy.
Yeah, you just got to keep putting it out there until you find that one person. It's the same concept as in sales. It's all a numbers game. If you hit this many doors, you are, by the law of averages, going to get this many sales. And so I had sent it to 20 people, and I decided it still sucks and it needs to be done again. So I'm not redoing it from scratch this time. I'm not throwing out my previous manuscript. I've at least gotten over that hump, where I think there are at least parts of this that are good enough to be either tweaked or just elevated a little bit or change the word choice, but the idea is fine. Where I'm stuck right now is that I wanted to expand in the beginning a little bit. So just the beginning of the story. I think the middle act and the final act are probably pretty much fine. I'll just go in and do a little bit of tweaking to those on some new ideas I've developed so that it's consistent and things work, and old ideas I've thrown out don't make their way into this version. But it was the beginning I wanted to expand on a little bit. And so I've been doing that. But the process is so slow because I work a full-time job, which normally entails more than 40 hours a week. It's usually more like 50, sometimes higher than that, depending on the season and the campaigns we're working on. Plus I travel. And then I have this podcast, which takes something like 20 to 30 hours a week of preparation and production and stuff like that. So then I also have a wife who would like to have a relationship with me. So, I got to put time into that. I'm not saying I got to, I want to. I want to have a relationship with my wife. So
I think it's also like you're doing her a favor as well. You're morally, it's the correct thing to spend time with her.
Yeah. So anyway, I simply just do not have time, and I have to carve it out somewhere. And I've been feeling more and more and more like if I don't do that in some kind of like very near future, it's probably just never going to happen. And so I'm trying to think about that. It's like, okay, tomorrow is a holiday. Tomorrow I'm not going to be at work. Do I spend the entire day writing the book? And then I look at the video that I just edited for the channel that's going up tomorrow, which I just spent all of yesterday, 12 hours, and half the day on Friday because we had a half day at work on Friday. So around 1 p.m. till about 9 p.m. on Friday. And then all day Saturday, I worked on that video and got it done. And I uploaded it, and I made a really cool thumbnail, and I went way hard in on it. And I just watched the intro to it this morning, and I hate it. And I want to fix it. I want to like change the way I worded certain things. And so that is always a battle with me. It's always, where do I prioritize my time? And so the book ends up being left on the chopping block, and that's why it's not getting finished. But I'm feeling more and more and more like you have to make a choice here. Is finishing this novel and publishing this novel in the long term in terms of your ambitions and goals for your life more important than this YouTube channel, or is the YouTube channel more important? And I don't know the answer today.
Yeah.
I just know I hate what I made.
Yeah. That's the hardest thing, man. I think for a lot of us who are trying by I don't know, very great lengths to take the thing that we love to do that has been our hobby for so long and turn it into our full-time thing. Thankfully, right now, my full-time job, I own a pool cleaning company here in Austin, Texas.
Oh, nice.
And it is something that it's good money. It's something that I've done for a long time, so I'm really good at it as well. The next step then is, okay, do I continue to build it and build it and build it, which is going to take a ton of time? Or do I build it up just a little bit more to where I have enough resources to just sell the company and then I'm good for like another couple of years or something, and then I can just focus on making YouTube videos or something like that. But yeah, it's always kind of up in the air. And then on top of all of that too, I'm also a video editor for another YouTuber as well, and I run my own channel, and I've got 3 kids and I got a wife, and I serve at my church. It's like all of these different things, and I'm like, okay, something has to give eventually, or I can just, I don't know, just slowly chip away at every single thing and kind of just be, what does Bilbo say? Stretched like butter across
over too much bread.
Yeah. And then,
I feel
can't
sort
do that.
of thin, stretched like butter scraped over too much bread.
Yeah. So, well, hey, I also wanted to discuss too, now that, thank you for sharing that stuff with me, man. I mean, I've been so interested about that process as well. I've never tried actually writing myself, but even just listening to this podcast and picking up the books that I have, like you said, things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, going over a lot of Joseph Campbell's works as well as Christopher Vogler and just tons of other stuff. That was kind of how I opened up my podcast with Casen. I was like, here's all the books that you inspired me to read. And then from there, paired with your podcast, I don't know, maybe I might try my hand at writing one day. I'm not sure. But just in regards to your podcast as well, I know that you and Casen are spending a lot of time diving into different philosophies, taking a look at a lot of symbolism and religious texts as well, seeing where a lot of these ideas from ancient authors or even like other modern philosophers and stuff, how a lot of that is feeding into the video games that you play. What is an aspect in which you personally have felt challenged by a video game that you have been playing? Like if there's a philosophy that you've come across or an idea where you're like, maybe I really do need to spend some time thinking about this.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. I'll share 2 examples.
Sure.
One comes from actually reading Jung while we were doing Xenogears, Carl Jung. The other is not so much from reading actually, then we have the Nier Automata stuff too. Okay, there's too many to list, so I'll just try to be brief here. With Xenogears, I feel like what I learned or what I took away from that podcast related to his thoughts on what he called the Anima and the Animus. You could also, essentially boil this down to the yin and yang, right?
Yeah.
The yin and yang is set up to where you have the white and the black kind of in harmony there, but within the white side, you have that little black dot, and within the black side, you have the little white dot. Mm-hmm. And so Carl Jung explained this with his Anima and Animus, that there's sort of the inner opposite that needs to be developed. So as a man, you need to develop your inner anima, right? The feminine side. And as a woman, you need to develop the inner animus. Mm-hmm. And that was just something that I had never really thought too deeply about before. And I think it's incredibly important because especially for men in the society in which we live in here in the US, I think there's a real focus on kind of a resistance to, and I don't want to get like political about this necessarily. Sure. I don't even think this is a political thing. Everything is politicized. But, there's a lot of debate about what it means to be a man or a woman. There's a lot of debate about the space kind of in between those two black and white sort of hard lines and the spectrum on which people exist and where they feel comfortable and whatnot. And there's a lot of pressure from one side or the other about what is appropriate and how you should act as this or that. And I think a lot of people just feel confused. Sure. And I think it creates just a lot of unnecessary shame and damage to a person about what they feel is true to who they are. And so particularly with men, I think, and with me, I grew up playing sports in high school and things like that. I grew up in a lot of very hyper masculine sort of communities and on teams and things like that, where this idea of what it means to be a man is a lot about expressing that sort of more tough, aggressive side of masculinity, and sure. that showing weakness or, embracing certain traits assigned to the feminine side of things is a demonstration of weakness and things like that. And while I never really fully bought into that, there was just a way in which Jung put it that for me just made so much sense, and I felt was so important to personal development and growth of people. Mm. And he talks about the first stages of Anima or Animus development. For Animus development, it's Tarzan, right? You have that a man who expresses his masculinity purely through physical power, dominance over others and things like that. And there's too much focus, I feel like, placed on that when people talk about what it means to be masculine. And sure. It also makes it really impossible to relate to half of the people on this planet when you're too much in that space, or when you believe that that's what it means. And so, just like everyone else, I've had my difficulties relating to significant others and things like that, women I've dated. And what I think I realized was that I hadn't done enough development of that inner opposite. When we're in that white space, the little black dot, right? Yeah. I hadn't given enough attention to that, or embraced that there needs to be a part of that in me that needs to be embraced and developed so that I can have better relationships with the women in my life. And I sort of really took that to heart and really tried to develop that. And I think it has immensely helped me in terms of developing myself and really gaining wisdom that makes it possible for me to understand all people. And so that's kind of what I took away from Xenogears. Of all things to take away from Xenogears, that was the one. Yeah. And the only thing that Anima and Animus even have anything to do with Xenogears is there's like freaking it's like I think it's like a power source or something like that. The Anima relics that you get for your gears so that they're more powerful or something like that. So it's always just referential. It's just in the names, but then you look what those are referencing, and that's where you learn all this crazy stuff. But so that was that one. And then actually Death Stranding several years ago when I played that, there's an online aspect to it for those who haven't played the game, where you sort of collaborate with people online, where you can share materials that you get in the game, which there's kind of this choice that has to be made. Do I want to keep these materials for my game and the things that I'm doing in my own progression and building my own stuff? Or will I donate these materials to the community online who are making paths, roads, whatever, safer for everyone?
Building bridges and zip lines and things like that.
Exactly, that everyone can use. And so the game's entire core is centered on that. Are you going to, in the face of this sort of apocalyptic event, stick to yourself and blaze your own trail and not rely on others and not unite and come together, but like, I'll do this myself, be self-reliant? Or are you going to give trust, make sacrifices to the community to make it easier for everyone. And I think my whole life I had been a self-reliance guy. I'm not a social person. It wasn't until I was probably 21 that I was forced to become more comfortable even being semi-decent at conversations like we're having now. I was really, really bad as a kid. I was really bad. I was super reclusive. I still am to a certain extent, but I've developed the skill to have a decent conversation with a person. So my tendency as I was playing the game was, why on earth would I give to the community I just wanted to play the game single player like every game I played.
Yeah.
And there's a conversation that happens in the game with one of the NPCs who has that kind of mindset, sort of the extreme of that mindset. A guy who's full-on self-reliant, never going to connect to the network, because that's kind of what you're doing in the game. You're trying to connect everyone to this chiral network and get everyone talking to each other again. And he's like, I'll never do that. No way. And he just goes on and on. He has this like several minute discourse, pontification about why connecting is a bad idea and we need to, stick to ourselves and all this stuff. And he just goes on and on. And he explains his whole view on that. And there's no way I'm connecting. Go away. Not go away, but like, I'm not doing it. Then
we got to stay isolated. Yeah.
Yes. And then he turns to Sam at the end of that conversation and says something like, wow, do you really have to go? It was so nice to talk to another person again. It's been so long. Which completely undermines everything he had just said.
Right.
And that struck me like so strong in that moment of how flawed the idea of total isolation and self-reliance is. It is not what we are meant to do as human beings. We are a communal species. We need others. And me insisting on those parts of my personality that want to recoil from society, want to get away from people, want to stay to myself, are self-damaging, and that I needed to really reevaluate that. And so for the rest of my playthrough, I continued to, as much as I could, donate and help develop the roads and bridges and zip lines and things that the community was building. And the experience became so much easier and so much better for it. And for whatever faults that game has, for whatever things people complain about in terms of its technical gameplay or anything, it had an absolutely life-changing effect on me in terms of how it delivered that message. And it didn't come through any of the game's cutscenes or anything like that. It came through just a little conversation with a side character, a side NPC, and the communal aspect of the online part of the game. And it changed the way I view things in a really big way. So those are probably two best examples.
Yeah. Well, and on Death Stranding too, I think that is, anytime that I see someone give the game high praise for its thematic presentation, I feel like it's generally that same sentiment, like especially in the time that it came out. Like, what a better message, there couldn't have been a better message than that right there. And I think it definitely did. Even for myself, I think to some degree, I definitely started looking at that. I'm a bit more extroverted, but in that time, I think that it was something that I personally needed to hear and experience. So thank you so much for sharing that, man. Is there maybe something right now, if you feel comfortable sharing, is there something right now that you personally feel like you're still kind of wrestling with?
Oh man. A lot of things.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maybe this will be something that someone in the audience will appreciate hearing. For whoever is watching this, whether you're somebody who, watches our channel, or maybe you watch Gavin's channel, you're hearing this from the first time, hearing from me for the first time or something like that. I think we all tend to struggle with, we see people out there creating something or doing something, and we think, man, like, those guys got it figured out, or they're doing such great stuff, and the stuff I make or what I'm trying to do is so inferior in comparison or something like that. There's a lot of comparing that we do in general, I think, in our society. We're kind of trained that way, I feel like. And not maybe even by design. Maybe it's just a natural thing that we do. We compare ourselves with others and we, feel inferior and that kind of thing. I want people who may look to the stuff I make and have that kind of feeling. I want you to understand that I constantly feel that way. Mm-hmm. Like I was just describing with this video that I worked on that'll go up. Well, at the time of recording this, it's going up tomorrow, which is Monday the 27th. What day is today?
Today is the 25th.
25th, so it's the 26th. Monday the 26th. We have a Suikoden 2 review going up. I poured every freaking ounce of energy and time and thought into making that as good as I could within the space that I could do it. Mm-hmm. The previous Monday, we had uploaded a Suikoden 1 review. These are of the new HD remastered ones. And it didn't perform the way I was hoping. And I got so frustrated by that, just in general, that I ended up having a 2-hour conversation with ChatGPT about my YouTube channel.
Dude, I've fallen down that same rabbit hole before for maybe different things, but sometimes you need a robot to talk to, man.
Yeah, and I was surprised because it's been a long time since I've had a conversation with ChatGPT. I feel like it's come a long way since the last time I talked to it. Obviously, these learning models are built that way. They learn over time and they improve and get better. So it was giving me advice about here's what you should do on your thumbnails. You do thumbnails like this, and thumbnails like this are more effective for A, B, and C reason. It's given me all this advice that's just like, holy crap, this is actually really good advice. I wasn't really expecting it to be this good. I was kind of just, messing around. And so I took all of it to heart. And I was like, okay, here are all the things that I feel like I can do to elevate the content, and I'm going to go ham on it with every minute of free time that I have this weekend. I'm not taking a holiday weekend, to relax or take a step back from work. I'm going to double and triple and quadruple down and make this thing as good as possible and do an A/B test between what we did last week and what we're going to release this week. I put, for those of you who may go end up watching this, or maybe you already did, I put a ton of time into a very specific title reveal shot of the Suikoden 2 logo, where it's actually the thumbnail image that I made, and nice. I've got Rio and Joey on either side. They're sort of divided, and you got like a red tinted side where Joey is, and there's fire and there's smoke and atmosphere, and then on Rio's side it's blue and kind of icy, and this camera that sort of like pushes in on that, and there's atmospheric effects and all the stuff I learned from my years in visual effects. And then I have a fire reveal of the title. And this title sequence alone probably took me something like 8 hours to make. And then I did sound effects to it to really make it come together. And I edited the video in such a way to where I was really, really trying to be very purposeful in my cuts, and maybe we're being a little bit too harsh here. Let's pull that back. I probably didn't mean to say it that way. Let's cut this and reframe it this way. Let me go record a whole different intro for it. I know I'm being a bit verbose on here, but it's on purpose. I'm trying to demonstrate how much energy and thought and time I put into it. And I got it done, and I uploaded it unlisted, and I sent it out to Casen. Like, hey, if there's anything you want me to adjust to this, just let me know. We got time. And I went to bed, and I woke up this morning, and I just, with a fresh mind, you do this a lot as a creator, where you think you did something and you finished it, you watch it again the next day, and you just hate it. You hate it. It feels like total trash. And you feel so defeated, right? The only thing I could think of was, now I'm going to spend all day today, maybe all morning tomorrow until noon when I upload it, trying to fix this now. When I had plans to do some other things, maybe work on the novel, maybe, get some work done in my yard or whatever. And now I'm going to be going even further on trying to like improve this because I think it sucks. I feel like all the time that my work is terrible. And so, well, I guess the message that I want to share here in terms of what I'm wrestling with is what you are feeling, if you are feeling that way, is something that I think most people deal with. And a lot of times it's not that the work you do is terrible or inferior or whatever. You are viewing it through the lens of your own insecurity. And that paints a very different picture than someone else who is not viewing that through the lens of that same insecurity will look at it. So I'll like double, triple, quadruple down on analyzing just one specific line, the way I worded something. And like, that's a really stupid way of wording that. But the only reason I think that that's true is because I have A, B, and C insecurity, and I'm assuming people will perceive the way that I'm saying that to mean this or this or this, or that I'm saying it this way, or that I didn't really think that through all the way, or that's actually kind of a lame way of saying it. And almost nobody else will have any one of those thoughts when they listen to that. And I've had a couple of experiences where the same thing happened, but on the reverse, right? Like I'm speaking with another creator or something like that, and they're telling me all the things that they think are really bad about what they made. And I'm going, didn't notice that, didn't notice that, didn't notice that, didn't notice that. There's a coworker I have, so I'm in a senior editing position. So there's a guy below me who he sends me his stuff and he says, hey, and he's just getting really granular about like the color correction on it. He's like, I'm going to send you like 4 screenshots here. Tell me which one you think is good. I know like gosh, I'm so mad at myself because the focus on her eyes is just a little soft here. So I've done a little bit of sharpening on this one, but on this one, and he's like telling me all this work that he did. And I'm looking at all 4 of these images. I'm like, these are freaking identical, dude.
Yeah, it's all the same picture.
I don't see a single freaking difference. Like a little bit in the background here, I feel like maybe it's a little warmer, but I don't see that as a bad thing. They all look good to me. You're good. That's literally what I said to him. I was like, but he is seeing everything through the lens of his insecurities, which are, things are tough at our company right now. They've been doing some layoffs. And he's feeling such a pressure to prove himself as a valuable member of the team when he doesn't even need to do that. They're not even, there's no consideration whatsoever for laying off anyone in our department. We've been performing really well. But he's looking at it that way. And so he's sweating all these little details. And yeah, maybe the focus was a tad soft in the eye at 6K or whatever you're freaking editing this in. And when it goes up at 1080p on the internet, not a single soul will notice that detail at all. And so I guess what I want to say is be mindful of that and trust somebody in your life to look at what you're doing and say, bro, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like you're way overthinking this. What you just said, that sentence or whatever that you want to re-record or whatever, I heard that and thought this, the 5 or 6 concerns that you had about it, never crossed my mind at all. Stop overthinking this and just move on, right?
Yeah.
You need a person like that in your life. I'm realizing this myself. And find that person and check yourself a little bit and stop being so hard on yourself, I guess is kind of what I'm wrestling with at this current moment.
Kind of in a similar fashion to that, a good buddy of mine is actually trying to start up his own podcast. He is very involved in the wedding photography world and videography and things like that. So the concept of the podcast is to have people who are in the wedding event kind of space. Maybe you do drone shots professionally. Maybe you do ice sculptures for like those huge, crazy weddings, right? Maybe you're a hairstylist or you do the bride's nails or something like that. He wants to have those people on and talk to them. So the thing that he is stressing out the most about right now is the video side of the podcast. He's never recorded a podcast before or anything like that. This is his first time doing it. He's thought about this for a very, very, very long time. And recently, both him and I, as well as a few of our other friends who do, like they make documentaries and stuff for a living. We have kind of all come together just to kind of run some tests with him to see, let's see how this works. And we've provided with him maybe $15,000 worth of equipment just to kind of use for setting up a little studio in his home. And the whole time, like he's like really stressed out about how it's all going to look, how it's all presented. And I'm like, hey, brother, just like maybe this is something where we can really get like thousands of people from episode 1 to tune in and watch all the shorts and things like that. I understand what you're going for, but also like I'm really hoping that you trust and believe that on this first episode, it's not going to be the visuals that are drawing people in, but I believe that you can be a good podcaster and can make an actual great conversation with somebody who is doing something like this. And to just kind of watch him kind of constantly be kicking himself over this thing that has not even happened yet. You know, a piece of me is like, man, is this even going to happen at this point? You know what I mean?
Before you even start, you're already self-sabotaging.
Yeah. So that's his situation right now. So I just, in that sense, I'm watching someone kind of go through this same struggle. And then I also personally, like you had said, just from the moment that you started talking about this, I'm like, dang, dude, it's me. He's talking about me right now, you know? So I feel you there.
I feel like a lot of people go through that. I think we're all our worst or our most obnoxious critic.
Yeah.
We're all our own biggest haters.
Yeah.
And, I think what I'm learning is that you need to have a person who can review what you're doing and just sort of like smack you and say, it's fine.
It's great. Yeah.
It's fine. Like you don't need to think, I didn't have any of those thoughts you had when I looked at that. It's fine. So find that person in your life and help, let them help you stay on track.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I'll tell you if this Weekend in Video sucks or not. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, thank you so much for this this conversation, man. I hope that anyone else who is out there kind of listening to this, I don't want to take up too much of your time here. I hope anyone who is able to hear that message, whether it be from this lens of the Anima and Animus, from that going to the Death Stranding idea of we need that actual real world connection with people, all the way, through this idea of not being so, like you say, obnoxiously analytical and critical of the work that you are putting out there. Maybe even if it's not content creation, maybe you're a father who thinks you could definitely be doing a better job, right? Sometimes like you have a situation like that where you need those other dads in your life or something, or maybe you're a mother also going through something like that. Having that community of people who are like, hey, dude, you're doing fine. It's fine. It doesn't have to even be content creation. That's something that I personally deal with quite often. So thank you for that, and I hope that anyone else listening is taking this to heart as well. And just analyzing that however you will and implementing that into your own life. I appreciate that. So I don't know, but is there anything else that you kind of wanted to share or plug or anything like that before we like totally sign off?
Definitely no need to plug anything, but just thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. I feel like almost more than anything, conversations like this, even just beyond the content creation part of it, help us to kind of work through stuff that's going on in our heads. Like, I didn't know any of the questions you were going to ask kind of before this, which I like that aspect of it. I like.
Hey, me too. I had like maybe one or two that I was like, I think I'll ask him about this.
Yeah. Just having, you know, a genuine sort of candid conversation. This is exactly why what I was saying about the human connection that I learned from Death Stranding is so important. Because had I not had this conversation with you today, I might not have worked through some of those things I just said there at the end. And I might have left this conversation to go work the rest of the day on this Suikoden video that probably doesn't even need any more work done on it.
Sure.
So here's my my commitment to the audience. I know this will be uploaded later, but I'm not going to go do it. I'm not going to go re-record it. I'm going to leave it the way it is.
It's good.
I'm going to resist the urge. I'm going to resist the urge to go redo that intro and all that other stuff that I was worried about. I'll let you judge whether or not what I made sucked. So let this be a lesson to everybody about whether or not we're too hard on ourselves, I guess. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk through all that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks, man. And to everyone else out there, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.